Everybody, it's Tina Knowles! It's Tina Knowles! The beehive is buzzing in here. Y'all doing it? Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this podcast. Welcome to Oprah's Book Club, presented by Starbucks. We're here in a Starbucks cafe in my old Chicago neighborhood. I spent so many mornings and nights, 25 years, walking my dogs all around this neighborhood. It feels so good to be back with you all. And I have to say, I love this idea of meeting a friend at your neighborhood Starbucks cafe to connect over a book and a delicious cup of coffee or tea. I think it's a great way to spend a morning or afternoon. And the pairing for my April's book club is the Sincera blend. It's a nice light coffee, a Starbucks blonde roast with citrus and toasted almonds. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Toasted almonds in your coffee. Don't you love that? And now I'm just so happy to be here to tell you what my 113th book club pick is. It's an intimate and revealing look into an extraordinary American life and family. It is a memoir, and it is a page turner about legacy. It's about love. It's about loss. It's about perseverance and the wisdom that is passed down through generations, especially from mother to daughter. It's called Matriarch. And we have the matriarch, Miss Tina Knowles. First of all, I was saying this to your editor, that this is a beautiful book. Talking about you can't judge a book by a cover. I think you can. This is pretty good.
Well, I love this artist. He's an African artist in Lagos, and I've got several paintings from him, and he always puts cherry blossoms behind it. Mm-hmm. And his paintings remind me of my mom. You know, I grew up in this little raggedy house, but my mom had the most beautiful rose bushes, and she just had this green thumb, and there were flowers everywhere. We always had flower wallpaper, and you know, flowers were so representative of her and her spirit.
Yeah. Well, you know, you are obviously one of the most recognizable and beloved mothers. So it is no surprise to me that this book hit #1 on Amazon charts the moment it was announced. Matriarch is the perfect title for your story. Why were you ready to share it now?
Well, you know, I thought I'd never do a memoir because, as you know, my family is super private,
Yes.
More so than me. But I always felt like I had to protect everybody and not talk about things. And there have been so many narratives about me and my family, so many misconceptions, so many lies, that I decided one day, you know, do I want people to tell my story after I'm gone and create their own narrative, or should I tell it? So that was very, very important to me that I got the story out myself.
Well, one of the things that I thought you did that was so admirable in Matriarch is that you tell your story, and we are fully engaged in your story, and all the people that are in your life, obviously your ex-husband, and ex-husbands, and your two very famous daughters, but you also don't expose their lives in a way that it feels invasive to them. You come away with a great sense of how, first of all, you all got to be who you are. And in Matriarch, you tell us about the mothers that came before you, and I want to list them. You are the daughter of Agnes, mm-hmm. and the granddaughter of Odelia, mm-hmm. the great-granddaughter of Celestine, which was your original name,
Yeah.
who had 10 children by her slave owner, and the great-great-granddaughter of Rosalie, who was also an enslaved woman.
Yes.
And one of the most sacred things that Maya Angelou had shared in one of her poems called Grandmother, she says, "I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. And in this book, Matriarch, we get to see how you came as yourself, as this fearless woman, but of all the people, particularly the matriarchs behind you, that allowed you to stand. How were you able to discover so much about the matriarchs in your family?
Well, just research. I was amazed by their resilience and their ability to still take care of their kids and make sure that they weren't sold or separated from them.
Well, I have to say that the story that your mother and father were from Weeks Island, Louisiana, your father worked in a salt mine making $9 a week. Your parents' story was so harrowing. Anytime I ask anybody, I would start talking about this book and I would say, and you got to hear the story about her parents. Can you tell us about your father going to the mine that day and your father and another man, because they were the lowest on the totem pole in the work order, were carrying the dynamite and there was an explosion and your father was in the explosion and the parts of the mine crumpled and
Collapsed.
they weren't going to dig for anybody. And then...
Well, they just didn't dig for people. They said there was no way that they could survive. And his brothers were like, we'll do it. You guys don't have to do it. But they put them out. And so they snuck back in after they closed. They blew the whistle at 3 and they dug my daddy and the other man out. So they saved them. And instead of being applauded for it, which you would think that they would have been, they were actually arrested and fired.
And told that they had gone against company policy by going back to get your father.
Yes.
And so then, this is what got me. Your father then, a union man comes along and starts talking to your father about, well, if you had been a part of the union, that wouldn't have happened to you.
Right.
The town owners, the bosses in charge, realize that the union man has been to see your father, and somebody ends up bombing the house.
Yes. They threw a firebomb.
They threw a firebomb in the house, and your parents had to escape.
Yes.
And that's how your parents ended up in Galveston.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your father ended up becoming a longshoreman, and your mother was a seamstress.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're the baby of 7 children, and you paint this vivid picture that you said you didn't feel like you were poor, although you all didn't have much. You said you felt like y'all were millionaires.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of all the camaraderie, because my sister had 8 kids and my brother had 4, and they all came to our house. So for me, even though we had this really poor little raggedy house, everybody was at our house. And so I just felt like, how could you feel bad about that? Because we just created our own playground, our own world. And I just never really thought about being poor till, I went to Catholic school and I was pointed out to me every day how poor we were and how unworthy we were.
You and I are born 3 weeks apart. I was same age, born 3 weeks apart. And I was raised in the South, but I got out. My grandmother became ill and I was sent to live with my mother in Milwaukee just before I started school.
Wow.
So as I was reading your story, I was thinking, wow, not being raised in a segregated school is the thing that made all the difference for me. It's the thing that really gave me confidence, because when I first moved to Milwaukee and I walked into kindergarten and I saw all these little kids reading, learning their ABCs, I was already a reader because my grandmother taught me how to read the Bible.
Right.
So I was like, I'm getting myself out of here. You had a very different story. Your story was the Catholic Church is across the street from your house and run by Black Catholic nuns. And when you go to this school, this is a school that the teachers' kids, the doctors' kids, the people who had, higher paying jobs could afford to send their children to Catholic school. Your mother, who was a seamstress, had y'all dressed like Beyoncé every day. You were dressed like Beyoncé, and your name was Beyoncé because that's your maiden name.
Yes.
And you go to school as this pretty little curly, cute-haired girl, and the nun says to you what on the first day?
Well, you don't belong here. If you only knew. And I was like, what does that mean? I had no idea what that
And you were
meant.
how old?
I was 5.
Can you imagine going to school and your first teacher says to you, you don't belong here? You don't belong here. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a life-defining moment.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And it was the source of my insecurity my whole life, is not belonging or people making up their mind about you before they even know you. And it's still, I'm 71 and it's still making me emotional right now because it was such a it's just such a horrible, evil thing to say to a kid.
Yeah.
Because you're already insecure about everything.
Yeah. Well,
but it made me fight, though.
And also,
It made me a warrior.
well, it made you a fighter. That's so interesting that it made you a fighter because, I when I read that story, I thought I would have shrunk. It would have made me so insecure because I was raised like your mother was raised. I was raised to respect authority. And if authority said this, then you got to obey and you got to, color within the lines and not break the rules. It did the opposite to you. It made you fearless and a fighter.
It did the opposite to me because also my parents were 44 when they had me. And I realized that after 7 kids and all the struggles, they were just tired. So I just had this mouth on me from day one.
Yeah.
And they, I remember my aunt used to come over and she would be like, that teeny you just need to discipline her because she has no respect. But it wasn't respect. If she said something, I said, why? I questioned her. And my parents allowed me just because they were tired. And I had a smart mouth. And I also realized in this book that because my mother was passive to everyone, I used to get so angry at her for being so passive. And, I could tell her that. And my mom would just say, oh, be quiet, teeny. And I remember us going to like a young white woman's house and her calling my mom Agnes. They always called her Agnes. And she said, Miss Smith, Miss. And I was just a little kid, but I would be like, she's younger than you. You should tell her to call you Miss.
Yes.
And my mom would say, Teeny, shut up. You just got the biggest mouth.
Well, several things I thought were defining moments. There is a story where the nun punishes you and you run across the street to home thinking your mother is going to stand up for you.
Me. Yeah.
And instead,
my mom says, I said, I don't like them and they're really mean and I don't want to go because I thought it was optional. And she said, oh, you don't have a choice. You have to go back. And she brought me back across the street.
Well, another huge defining moment I thought was, and I couldn't believe this, that your mom didn't stand up for you in this moment. Tell us the dress story.
Oh.
So the nuns,
they came to me and said, oh, do you have a pretty white dress?
it was going to be for some ceremony. What is it?
Every Friday in Catholic school during Lent, they would crown the Blessed Virgin Mary. So you get to wear a little dress, white dress, and a mantilla like you're a bride, and you get to crown the statue. And I thought, oh, God, they like me. So I went home, and my mom, it was on a Wednesday, and my mom went and got a remnant little piece of fabric and made me this beautiful dress. And then I brought the dress back, and they took the dress from me and gave it to Linda Kendison. Now, I'm 71 years old, but I remember Linda Kendison. and they
Where is
said,
Linda Kendison today?
and they're like, her mom passed away, and I was very sympathetic, but I was like, I still don't want her to have my dress, which set up a lot of guilt in me, because I was like,
No, it set up a lot of guilt, Tina, because the nun said to you, you're a mean little girl. You
got
don't
all
want to give
those
your dress.
dresses.
You don't want to give your dress to her. So, I think for the nuns to set you up, to lead you to believe that you're going to be the little girl that's going to be a part of that ceremony, you come with the dress, and they say now you have to give the dress to the other person.
Right.
That is devastating.
And I felt so guilty because I was like, I should not be. They were like, you're selfish. You're just such a mean, vain little girl.
And your mother says, give her the dress.
And I'm like, I don't want her to have my dress. I was ready to fight her. And I was mad at the little girl, which made me feel bad because then my mom said, you still got your mom. We can make you a new dress, but she can't make another mom. So it was so confusing and abusive to a little kid.
Yeah.
But the lesson in that is so memorable for me is that the day she wore the dress, she wore the dress and crowned the Blessed Virgin Mary because she was so happy. And it meant so much to me because I did that. And that's what my mom was so smart, because she said, you did that. You brought her that joy by giving her something that was so important to you. So my whole life, if something is really, really dear to me, when I give it away, it means so much more because it's something that I really valued. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to give away stuff that you don't care about, but it's really hard to give away things that you love. So
especially when you're a little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, I can see where that moment of the nun saying, you're mean and you're so selfish, would also instill in you this whole, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I don't belong, which is the first thing that she was trying to tell you. You know what I thought when I was reading? I said, they knew you were cute. They knew that your mother was a major contributor to the school. And as you say in Matriarch, that your parents were like, your whole family was like indentured servants to that school. Everybody's working and cleaning the yard, and your father's driving for them, and your mother's making every single thing in the church for them. So I think that they were jealous of you. Don't you think that? I think they resented you. They resented you. It was a class thing.
Yeah, it was a class thing.
It was
for
a class
sure,
thing.
because they felt like their self-worth was tied into teaching a teacher's kids, and they shouldn't have to be bothered with us little poor kids. Like, we just didn't measure up, and so it was a waste of their time. That's what I've got from them all the time, for sure.
Let's go to the audience. Like we said, you and I are almost exactly the same age, and from the time when children were seen and not heard, but you made sure that you were heard. That's how you got your nickname, Badass Teeny B.
Yeah.
And you write that God had given my mother the most cautious, you said, most cautious woman I would ever know, a girl without fear. So where's Tiffany?
Yeah, and that's what resonated with me as well. My parents, my mom specifically, taught me how to respect my elders and everything, but she also gave me a voice. It's okay to question. It's okay to speak out if something wasn't right. My question to you, Miss Tina, was what gave you that fearlessness? What inspired you to want to speak out when things weren't right? Not just with yourself, but with people that you love as well.
Well, I think my fearlessness came from survival. You know, for someone to tell you, I'm going to break the evil spirit in you, and you just 5, like, I knew that if I didn't stand up to them, that they would just really abuse me.
Imagine you were 5 and a nun, all nun-like, says to you, I'm going to break the evil spirit in you, and you're 5. I mean,
vain. They used to always say, and I went home and asked my mom, I was like, what is vain? And she said, it's when you think you're cute. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to have anybody think that I think I'm cute. But I would say in my head, I would call them the B word in my head, because I was a little cusser. And I would just think to myself, no, you're not, and stand up to them. I was just so stubborn. If you talk to anyone in my family, they will tell you how stubborn I was.
So your mother would tell you family stories under a pecan tree, which you say nourished your soul. And I love that whole section of the book so much. You write, a part of that was my mother making sure that I knew what an honor it was to be Black. You've been known to wear T-shirts that reads 100% Black, and you once declared, I'm the blackest woman you'll ever meet. Yumi in our audience has a question about that.
Hi, I was just really struck by that line of, I'm the blackest woman you'll ever meet, and just thought about not only the motherhood, but the themes of liberation. In fact, that line of Celestine set herself free and her family free. My mother walked out of a civil war in Liberia and actually resettled in Houston, was a seamstress, sewed all of our clothes. And I just thought about that idea of, when she was teaching you about how your value is tied to your service to others, and you wanted to fight that and talk about liberation. And my question is, what is your advice to Black women who are in spaces that are not designed for them, or not designed for them to own those spaces? How do you encourage them to own the space and to liberate themselves?
Well, that's a great question. I've always preached to my daughters that you got to knock the doors down, and that you should be at home at any space that you choose. And that was preached to them from the time they were younger, because I wasn't given that. I wasn't given that message all the time from my mother, but what I did get from her is that it was an honor to be Black, that it was spicier, that it was, it was strong, it was the best, that our music was the best, and our cooking was the best, the way we walked, the way we dressed. My mom loved dressing, and that's such a great thing. My daddy and my mama were sharp. They didn't have any money, but they made sure they're sharp. Even if they had to get, Goodwills. I got Goodwill shoes my whole younger life because my mom would say, I'm finding you some Buster Browns. And
Y'all remember Buster Browns? Anybody old enough to know Buster Browns?
So I was always taught to be very, very proud of being Black.
Wow. And your maiden name is Beyoncé.
Mm-hmm.
And so when your daughter was born, you decided that you would call her Beyoncé because it was a way of passing it on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because we didn't have a lot of boys. So I was like, the name is going to become extinct. So I named her Beyoncé. Much to my dad, he was like, girl, that baby going to be really mad at you. because you're naming her last name.
In Matriarch, you also share what it was like raising your daughters, Beyoncé and Solange. And you did a beautiful job of letting us know what that was. And I think that what you did so beautifully also was you gave equal billing to both of them, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that was important to you, right?
Yes, it was very important to me to just highlight both of them because obviously, when I go on shows or I do anything, people, they like to talk about one of my children, and so I have to include all of them. Yeah, that was really, really important. It's a constant thing for me to have to fight for.
What's interesting is, though, that you could see from the very beginning, and all of those of you who are mothers know this is true, that none of the children are alike. They come into the world with their own thing, their own nature, and then there's the nurturing that you all give to them. And from the very beginning, they were so different, you tell us, in Matriarch. Mm-hmm. You all learned early on that when Beyoncé was a baby, that she could only be soothed with music. Mm-hmm. And Solange was the opposite. She would be soothed by reading and other things, but Beyoncé only responded to music. And you say that Beyoncé loved the freedom of your family dynamic that it gave her, but yes. Solange wanted something more practical and more structured. How did you figure that out?
Well, it was very obvious from the very beginning because Solange, one of my girlfriends, was very structured, very educated. Everything had to be a certain way. Her kids made straight A's, and Solange was very attracted to it. So she was always telling me I didn't measure up to Cheryl.
Yeah.
In no uncertain terms, and Beyoncé loved the freedom of not having a structure. And Beyoncé was very much like me because when I never enjoyed school. I don't ever have a good memory other than the talent shows or the Black History program or something that was creative or even home economics where I got to sew and do things. I'm that creative force. And I think for B, in her creative space, I think she was very much like me. So I could really relate to her because she could do the work if she wanted to, but she didn't want to. If she could have skipped school, she would have skipped school and just had her music career.
Oh, and yeah, there was that one time you skipped school and Solange was very upset. You took the girls to the beach and Solange was very upset because what kind of mother would let us skip school?
Right. She would say it all the time. She would say it to my friend Cheryl and she would say it to the therapist, and the therapist is like, Solange needs structure. And I'm like, God, it's like I wasn't a good mom because I love for them to miss school and hang out with me. And my mama loved for me to miss school. She would say, your stomach hurt? Okay, you don't have to go. And so I know that wasn't the responsible thing. And she reminds me to this day of, she accepts it now, Solange does. But when she went to see the therapist, she was like, my mama is so irresponsible.
I think this is so interesting that you put your daughters in therapy at a very young age, at a time when it was considered taboo, especially in the Black community. I remember in 1986 when I started the Oprah show, everybody was like, I would never go to a therapist, and going to a therapist makes you crazy.
That's what
and one of your siblings told you you're going to make the girls crazy because they're too young. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something in your instinct said the girls needed to go to therapy. Why?
I got so scared because they were like super close. Then all of a sudden, Solange was taking Beyonce's stuff, and Beyonce was kind of being a little mean to her, and I had never seen it before. It scared me to death because I was like, I want them to be close, and I want them to respect and love each other.
Is this after Beyonce started performing?
Yeah, Beyonce was performing. She was this little local, star, and Solange was she started very early too, but it was like people would, if they saw the two girls, they would say, oh God, oh, she's so talented. And you know how they do. And then my other child is there and I'm like, hey, you better tell her something too.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any problem doing that. But I saw this thing and I think...
you saw the division starting to happen. I saw the
division. And also what really shocked me and made me move forward with it was the girls, the group was at our house all the time. And I just noticed they started saying, sit down, Solange, shut up, Solange. And Beyonce wasn't defending her. So that mama bear, that defender in me said, you got to protect your sister.
Gotta
and she
fix
was like,
this.
but she gets on my nerves. She's all in my stuff. So that's why I took them. Okay. And it was the best thing I could have ever done for them because they got close again. And Beyonce started respecting Solange. Because, the therapist was saying, you're going to make your little sister, feel very insecure.
Let's talk about the discovery of Beyonce. Can you tell us a story of you and your ex-husband, Matthew, watching her perform for the first time when you saw her on
She
stage?
was 7 years old, and she did this they called it a parochial school talent show with up to high school. And I was so scared because I was like, they're going to ruin her confidence. But she got out there and just turned into the biggest little diva on stage. And she was shy, very shy. That's why we got her into it anyway. And we couldn't believe that it was her. And she came off the stage. I mean, she got a standing ovation. And she came off the stage and she was like, I'm hungry. I want to just get my trophy and my money and go. And I'm like, oh my God. Because that old thing about being cocky or thinking you're cute or thinking you're all that kicked in for me. So I was like, you don't know if you won and you got to be humble and but anyway, it was the best thing that could happen to her because she could turn it off. Like when she came off the stage, she was just Beyonce, and she's still like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's the furthest thing from a diva that you could be. But
that's because of the way she was raised.
She's a diva.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
and we love it. Listen, I play Cowboy Carter every single morning. My alarm is Texas Hold'em. Okay. This ain't Texas. Okay. I have to say, though, that your ability to see the difference between the daughters and make a distinction, I think is what has allowed them to be as close as they are now and also to be respectful of it. I loved in the book where you say, Solange is art.
She is art.
She's not just an artist, she is art.
Yes.
Yes.
She is because everything is seen through the lens of art. I mean, sometimes it's irritating because I'm like, girl, this ain't art, this is life. But that's how she sees things, as an art piece. And it's different. It's really unique.
Yes. Yeah. Let's talk about Johnny, or Uncle Johnny. We know him in Beyonce's song Heated. We know that so much of the Renaissance was dedicated to him. He was your nephew.
Yes.
But also your best friend. He was your confidant.
Mm-hmm.
He was your partner in crime.
Yes, always.
And I thought it was really interesting that for these times, he was so accepted and embraced in the family.
Yes.
Right? You say Johnny lived life which is different from just living. And my friend Paulo and his husband, Patrick, are here. Patrick, you have a question about this, right?
I do. There was actually a line about Johnny that I stopped and I had to read it again and I started to cry because you said Johnny was obviously gay by the time he was 3 years old. And I felt like I already knew the end of the sentence was going to be about how hard and struggle and traumatic it was. I'm from New Iberia, which is right up from Weeks Island. So like I thought of my own experience and how hard it was, the rest, the description would be. But then the second half of the sentence just took me aback because you said, and I never knew him to hide that light. And you describing his gayness as a light, it made me so emotional because it made me think of myself and look back at the little boy I was and the story I have about how hard and shameful and you had to hide and suppress. And then I was able to really look at myself and see light there. And it just was amazing. It was an extraordinary act of like unconditional love. And I just wonder if it felt like that to you or if it just felt normal, like that's how your family was, no big deal.
It felt so normal to me because Johnny was so special, and I just thought everybody accepted, we just always accepted it. And his mother accepted him, and my mother accepted him. He was, her favorite grandchild. And so people respected him because we respected him.
Ooh, that's such a powerful thing. People respected him because the family
respected him. And my brothers respected him. My brothers were these macho athletes, and my nephews were, but they accepted Johnny. They walked down the street with Johnny and his sharp clothes, and we were proud of him, and so everybody else was.
Didn't they try to get him one time to play ball, some kind of ball?
They made him play basketball. He didn't like it at all. And
What happened to you too?
Same.
Right. They were going to macho him up a bit, but just to protect him, though. It came from a love of protection for him, not from a we're going to beat you down type way. And they left him alone after that, and they was like, Johnny will make the costumes for basketball, but he didn't want to play basketball.
Well, we can certainly see where Beyonce's flair for costuming, because when you go to any of the concerts, it's all about the show, and the costumes is such a big part of the fantasy that she creates on stage that transforms the audience. And I could see from the first story about your mother, and knowing that your mother came from seamstress, and you know how to do it, and that you were doing all the clothes for Destiny's Child. And the way you were treated in the beginning by the record company doing those clothes, so disrespectful. Yeah.
Not only the record company, but when I would go to shoots and people wouldn't talk to me, or, because I was country and I had this big hair, and I never, in the early days, would do myself up because I was so busy all the time. And it was also a thing of not wanting to stand out, I think. I've thought about it many times because I don't have a passive personality, but I would let people say things because I thought I deserved to be not on their level back then.
Yeah, you don't belong here.
Exactly.
That
it
nun
keeps
thing
resonating in your brain.
You don't belong here. And so you were doing the clothes, and the record company people are complaining that they're looking too much like the Supremes.
Motown.
You're trying to make them look like Motown.
Yeah.
And then that all changed when?
Well, it changed later, but it was a fight. The whole thing was a fight for a long time. And then, but people love the costumes. The people love the costumes. The fashion magazines didn't love them. The designers didn't love them. They made fun of it all the time. And even to the point where I remember Beyonce went to the Oscars one year, and I did this fabulous gown with like origami. It was black and gold. And everybody was going crazy on the red carpet. And then when she finally felt comfortable to say, my mom did the dress, they said that it looked like I got the fabric out the drapes and made it for her. Because it was like, and it was so defeating because I was so excited because I was like, finally they accepted, and, they made fun of it.
The other thing that was so interesting is that your ex-husband, Matthew, was able to instill within the girls at a very early age how to protect their money.
Yes.
And I think that, first of all, I think you were very fair to your ex in this book. Because I know there's lots of things you could have said that did not get said in this book. There was a never-ending cycle of him cheating. I mean, from the first sentence that you write about that, shortly after you all got married, I think the sentence was something like, he had a problem with fidelity.
Yeah.
And Roshni, you have a question about that?
I do. I was married 6 years, divorced for 8, recently remarried. And though there was infidelity in my marriage, the things that existed before I got married with my husband was very much present in my marriage. I just didn't see it. So the question is really, when you had the early signs from Matthew, what made you want to commit or move ahead anyways? But then what kept you there?
First of all, I hope that I made it very clear in the book that my whole life with Matthew was not filled with heartache. that there were some amazing moments also.
Yeah.
I also had just lost my mom at 26. He knew my mom. I knew his mom. And what he was so kind to my family. My family is everything to me. So imagine you losing your mom at 26. Your brothers and sisters are older. They got their own families, and you feel so alone. And like, that's my best friend, you know? And in a lot of ways, he had an issue, but he was so kind to me. And it sounds crazy because that's not kind to cheat on somebody. I think he had an illness, but we were a team. And, we had kids and we built a life together. We built businesses together. We connected on so many levels. So I don't know. When I look at it now, I can't believe I stayed there for that long. Self-esteem issues, obviously. Those nuns telling me I wasn't good enough. So I was like, I'm lucky to have somebody that's successful and smart.
Did you
and
ever
better than me?
Did you ever?
In
wow.
some ways, you think that.
Yeah. Did you ever? I was going to say, did you think was because you weren't doing enough, that you weren't enough for him? Did you think that?
Oh yeah, at times. Yeah. I think you do go through that when somebody cheats on you, and it also keeps you in a cycle of. It's kind of like somebody slapping you in the face, and then you don't get to recover. And then you get another slap in the face. You can't really get your strength up, And there were times when I did get my strength up. But then I would have these kids and I say, I'm going to be by myself for the rest of my life because I'm not going to bring some man around my kids. That was always that fear of protection. And I swear, every time somebody would start messing with me, and he was my protector. He was always a protector. He's still my protector. If something went wrong, I would want him on my team.
How would you describe how is your relationship today? Because you all are grandparents together.
We're fine. I say in the book that I still love him as a brother. Even though the things he did, I knew that they were out of a illness. They weren't intentional, and that sounds crazy. I know I still sound codependent, but I just know that he would take a bullet for me. And if somebody messed with me, he was right there all the time. He was the person who always told me, you could do anything. You could do anything you put your mind to. You can have whatever you want to have. I mean, he believed in me when nobody else did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you married again when you were 61, I think, right?
Yeah.
To actor Richard Lawson, and divorced after almost 10 years. And our friend Tyler Perry, in the book you talk about, told you something. What was that? He told you about that?
He just told me that I told him what happened, and he loves Richard also. And he was like, I'm very sad to hear that. And I said, but, this marriage is not bringing out the best in me. And I have finally found my worth, and I know that I deserve to be happy. I know I deserve for somebody to be happy when they see me and to celebrate me. And it's not doing it for me. It's bringing out the worst in me, and it's got to stop. And he said, he was teary-eyed. He was like, I am so proud of you coming from a family where women stayed no matter what. And it's taken a lot of courage. I said, I'm doing this for my daughters, too. So I want to set that example for them. And he said, you're not only doing it for your daughters, but you're doing it for your grandson. Because you think that you're doing something to stay in a marriage that's unhappy, that you're not celebrated or you feel fulfilled, you are affecting your grandson too, because he wants you to be happy and how he's going to treat the woman that comes along. And I never thought about that, but he was just so supportive of me.
Well, you write something that really, I think, helps us to see the kind of woman and matriarch you've been all these years. You say, mothering someone is such an important job. You naturally put yourself on the back burner, wanting to do so well that you end up losing yourself. You say, I was no doormat, but I was damn sure hard-headed about taking care of everybody except me, and yes, getting the praise for it. So what was the turning point that you realized enough, that moment where you say to the girls, look, I'm going to start taking care of myself?
Well, that was after my divorce. And I was really nervous about it because I had been so engrossed in taking care of them and making sure that they were okay and not feeling worthy of, just loving myself and taking care of myself or taking a day off. If I was in the middle of something that I really wanted to do and my girls called me, I would drop whatever, whomever, and be right there. And so I felt like I had to have that talk with them to warn them. And I was scared of how they would react because, you guys know, mothers are kind of taking, my kids are wonderful. They acknowledge me. They love me. They would do anything for me. But it's a kid's nature to be a little self-centered. But I told them, and surprisingly, they said, Mom, we're so happy to hear that because, they were excited for me. They weren't pissed off about it. They were actually excited that I was going to have my own life.
Lindsay, you have a question. Hi.
Hi, Oprah and Miss Tina. I met my husband shortly after his first wife passed away, and as someone who's mothering 5 children, so 2 biological and 3 stepchildren, I tend to just doubt myself and constantly feel like I'm not enough of a mother to each of them or my own expectations. And I think that's why I was personally so moved later in the book when your daughters were reassuring you that all your sacrifices had impact and made them who they are. Knowing that and also knowing that you've mothered one of the most successful artists of all time, I'm curious if you still have those feelings of self-doubt or regrets or all the things we could have, should have done, or do you say, you know what, I'm truly now at peace?
I am truly at peace with myself. I have never felt better about myself in my life. It's something about turning 70 that all of my mistakes and things, the shame that I had about a lot of things, I tell them all the time, and I don't know if I can say this, but I don't give a shit anymore about what somebody thinks of me, what they say about me. I'm just protective of my kids. So if I don't want to ever do anything to embarrass them or make them feel bad. But other than that, what you say about me kind of rolls off my back because I feel good about me. I feel good about taking the time for myself to look nice and to dress nice and to take care of me. I don't have any guilt or shame about it. So I feel really good about it. And I know that I made a lot of mistakes. And I think if I had anything that I would do over again, it would be that I would have left the marriage way earlier. Because I still feel that I didn't set the greatest example in that way for them.
I think you've done a pretty darn good job.
So you now have 6 grandchildren.
Yes.
Beyonce's Blue, twins Rumi and Sir, Solange's Jules, and Kelly's Titan and Noah.
Yes.
And Clotilde, I hear you have a question.
Thank you. Yes. So in the book, you mentioned that the nun in Holy Rosary stated that you weren't, good enough, basically, right? And there were moments of not belonging throughout the book. But you said, I belong anywhere I want to be. So how has those words played a role in your success, and how have you been able to pass that on to your children and your grandchildren?
It's funny because my girls will say, Mama, you don't always have to have your dukes up. Beyonce tells me that all the time. But I think I had to fight for space. But I don't know if it was the nuns telling me I didn't belong, that I fought to belong in the spaces that I've been in. And I taught them from day one that they deserve to be anywhere that they wanted to be. And that's, again, people will not always welcome you, but you got to welcome yourself.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You say that you've been asked many times, what is the proudest moment you've had with your daughters? And what is your answer?
Oh, God. The proudest moments are when they do something that's not about entertainment, but when they do a charitable thing and they are good people, just regular good people and have good hearts. That sounds corny and it sounds like a cliche, but it's really the truth. I just get so full and so proud when they respect people and they do charity or they do, something that's a normal thing.
You got to have been proud. Listen, when it was announced that Beyoncé won the album after all this time, I was like, because I was just sitting there like, okay,
I know, me too.
Who's it going to be? And I almost peed on myself when it happened. I was just like, oh my God, it did happen. It happened. So that had to be it had to feel like finally.
But you know what? It was more so than pride. I felt like it was fair.
Yeah.
That was my happiness. I just felt like they gave her a fair shot.
Yes.
For the real, she's won a lot of Grammys, but sometimes I felt like some of those were consolation prizes. And so for me, I don't know if I was so much proud as I was happy for her.
Like finally.
Finally.
You got the recognition you deserved.
You got the recognition you deserved,
For an album that was so out of the box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that came from a place of pride for her, because when she went to that award show, she was not treated well. And it was very much me back at Holy Rosary where somebody said, you don't belong here. And, you're not good enough. And that was like saying, I took my seat at the table, whether you like it or not, and I deserve to be here. I deserve to be anywhere I want to be. Yes.
Anywhere you want to be. You tell the story of, I think it was the first album, and you all walk into the listening session, and there are all these guys around, and they're saying, there's not one single hit on this album. And it turns out, there wasn't one single Beyoncé. There was 5.
That's right.
There was 5 hits.
That's the best feeling.
But that condescension, that still doubting, that still lack of respect that you all were getting when she was Beyoncé.
I wondered about that. Why? But they really set us up. And if I wasn't badass Teeny B, who produced badass Beyoncé, we would have said, okay, we better go back to the drawing board. Yeah. But that just made us want to fight. And it challenged her to go and get Jay on the record, which was great. But the sad part is it came because she said they wouldn't do this to Jay. They wouldn't tell him this, but they telling me this.
Yeah, and so from the beginning, you saw this relationship between Jay and her blossoming.
Not from the beginning, because they talked for like a year on the phone. And I was like, oh, God, I don't ever remember talking to somebody for a year on the phone. Like, this is moving really slow. But, and so it took them a year to really get together. And when she went to do, the movie in L.A. was, I think, the first time that he had been to our house for dinner. And, but they weren't dating then, and they weren't talking like that. So, it took they moved pretty slow.
As matriarch, having passed on your love and wisdom and nurturing now to your daughters, what kind of matriarchs are they?
Oh, God. That is, I can't believe how good of a mother they are. All of them. They're just really good mothers that are natural and that they love their kids and they put their kids first. And I'm getting emotional because I feel like I passed that on, because my kids were always my priority. Because I did a lot of screwing up when I was younger, and I was, a little bit rebellious. And, I went through the thing with being mad at my mom. And so all the things that she didn't give me, I decided I was going to give it to them.
But now you understand. We understand why you were mad at your mom. That moment you overheard that conversation where you'd been taken to the hospital, you overheard your mom say, after you were examined, was she pregnant or is she pregnant?
It was the most hurtful thing ever, because I wasn't thinking about screwing in, because I was really focused on getting out of that town. I don't know if I'm saying the wrong thing, but I'm just saying, like, I wasn't, and so it was a very painful thing for me.
So
and
what it said to you is your mom didn't trust you.
She didn't trust me.
Yeah.
But my mom told me eventually, it wasn't you that I didn't trust. I didn't trust the world with you.
Yeah. And that's what I thought about your mom. I thought, yes, she was passive, but she also was fearful, as all Black moms needed to be, because look at what happened to your brother.
Right.
Your whole family was traumatized for years in that town. And your brother beaten and the family harassed and you arrested and all that. And so your mother had reason to fear.
And just think about how could she
Black
be
Southern
so
moms
brave.
would fear every time your child is out of the house.
And I'm fearful every time my grandson is out of the house. I'm like, make sure you do this. I mean, we as Black women have to teach our sons and our grandsons and our granddaughters, because my mom was always saying, you got the biggest mouth and you don't know how to control your temper and you're so smart mouth. If somebody stops you, just shut up. Just shut up and make it home. And that's a shame that we have to tell our kids to shut up and make it home.
Okay, I want to end with this beautiful passage in the memoir. Would you read it?
I am 70 and I just learned that I am enough. I wish I would have realized this at 40 or 50, maybe even younger. But that is why I am telling you. I have tried to collect as much of that wisdom as I can to pass on here. This precious time of gathering memories is closing. It's not an end, I know, but my new beginning.
Yes. Liberation. Liberation time. I'm telling you all, you're going to love this memoir. It's going to open up you to thinking about the matriarchs in your own life. You did such a great job. Congratulations to you and to your editor and all the people who made this possible, who decided, look at you on here, honey. I don't know if you think you're cute, but you ought to think you're really cute. Matriarch is available wherever books are sold. And Ms. Tina also reads the audio version of this book. Thank you so much.